Dr. Wecht, thank you for joining me again and welcome back to the program. How are you today?
Fine. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Good to be with you.
It's very nice to see you again, Doctor. You were with us, I think, in September, not that long ago, making some comments on the photos of Jeffrey Epstein, and you pointed out several anomalies with the autopsy, even stating your own opinion that this hyoid bone fracture was more indicative of a homicide than a suicide by hanging. And now your colleague, Michael Baden, has come out and said the same. What have you learned about this autopsy, this death, since the last time we spoke?
Well, now I have confirmation in detailed, definitive, and official fashion. I received from Mr. Epstein's brother a copy of the autopsy report, and I have had phone discussions with Dr. Baden, who is a longtime friend and close colleague. There were fractures of the hyoid bone, a delicate U-shaped bone high up in the neck, just underneath the mandible, the jawbone, and then there were bilateral fractures of the thyroid cartilage, which are being depicted now on the screen in front of me. So you have three separate fractures depicted by the black lines: the hyoid bone up toward the end, and then the thyroid cartilage, the Adam's apple, one on each side. You do not get these kinds of fractures in a suicidal hanging, especially the kind of suicidal hanging that is reported now to have occurred with Jeffrey Epstein leaning into it. The rope tied around the bedpost 3 to 4 feet above the ground level, and reportedly from the one person who found him, he was kind of kneeling forward. There was no leaping from the top bunk. The top bunk was strewn with toiletries and other personal articles. There was no disarray. Nothing was strewn about. Nothing had been knocked off there. He did not leap from the top bunk. So if they were talking about a suicide, it would have been a kneeling forward. You do not get these three fractures: the deep furrowing in the neck, hemorrhages inside the little muscles and soft tissues around these structures within the neck, in that kind of a suicidal hanging. Think Robin Williams from The Doorknob. That's the kind of a scenario that they have officially depicted, and it does not work. I believe, I concur completely with Dr. Baden, who was present throughout the autopsy, that this was a ligature strangulation, a homicide, not a suicide.
It's interesting, Doctor, and you had mentioned to us last time that there were anomalies with the process where the New York City Medical Examiner was not present and hadn't signed the autopsy. What can you say about that, given the new information that you have?
It is important, highly relevant to note that the autopsy was performed by an experienced board-certified forensic pathologist on the New York City Medical Examiner staff. She, that pathologist, signed the manner of death out as pending. Let me say at this point, so people understand, death certificates signed by doctors in hospitals and so on do not have a manner of death. If it's anything other than natural death, by definition, by law, it becomes a coroner or medical examiner's case. Coroner and medical examiners' death certificates have, in addition to cause of death, A, due to B, due to C, they have separate blocks which require a signing off a choice of one: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined, pending. And that is the way it was signed off on that Sunday, August 10th, by the pathologist who did the autopsy.
Wow.
Dr. Barbara Sampson, who is the chief medical examiner and who is an experienced, skilled forensic pathologist. This has nothing to do with her knowledge, her experience, and the high regard with which she is held. I want to make that clear. But for inexplicable reasons, as far as I know, in the next 4 days or so, She having come to the office the next day, Monday, which would have been then August 11th, I think 3 days later, she issued a report signing the case out as suicide. I do not know the basis for that ruling, but I can say, and you can say, and anybody can say, given the intervention by the U.S. Attorney General, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, local authorities. Obviously, investigations had not been concluded in 3-4 days. Think of all the people that have to be interrogated, that had to be interviewed, everybody in that jail, everybody that had access to that jail, administration, prisoners, guards, and everybody. Could they have been interviewed? Of course not. So what reports could she have received? I do not know. I do not know the basis, and I'm not going to engage in any conjecture as to the etiology of her decision. I'll let the record speak for itself. But these are hard facts. And that's before you get to the surrounding circumstances, which are indeed absolutely fascinating and highly relevant.
Yes. And Doctor, you have been involved in a number of controversial cases, another number of controversial issues that involve the government. I don't know if anyone has ever before heard of an instance where such a high-level government official as the former Labor Secretary, Alexander Acosta, came out in public and said that he declined to prosecute Epstein to the fullest extent of the law because he was specifically instructed that Epstein was intelligence and he should leave him alone. So again, I'm not going to ask you to speculate, but it's certainly possible that some of these officials are being influenced by outside forces that are perhaps beyond the scope of our discussion today. Now, there's an interesting article, Doctor. Sorry, was there something you wanted to add?
No, I was just going to concur with what you just stated.
Yeah. There was an interesting article, Doctor, and I know that you had said in our first conversation that you had known Dr. Baden and were friends with him. I didn't know too much about him before. I mean, I recognize him now, having seen him over the years with OJ, et cetera. But I found it really interesting that New York Magazine and their famous intelligencer made a point of coming out yesterday. Sarah Weinman wants people to question Michael Baden, and this article doesn't deal with the details of the autopsy and the facts in the way that you have, but rather it assails Dr. Baden's character and sort of speculates about his removal from the New York Medical Examiner's office back in the 1970s, I think. I didn't realize that Dr. Baden had been in the New York Medical Examiner's office. Do you know anything about this history?
Oh, yes, that's where we first met. Michael was on the staff already. We met at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences in the early mid-1960s, and we became friends from that time. He was a forensic pathologist on the ME staff for all those years under the distinguished top forensic pathologist in the country, Milton Halpern. Then Michael became a deputy associate, and then he was named as the chief medical examiner. I also am personally familiar with what happened when they took action against him because he said, maybe he shouldn't have said it, but we all know it to have been true, that Nelson Rockefeller died while in the arms of his mistress at their special apartment condominium, whatever it was, up on Fifth Avenue. So that brought pressure on Michael. I know all of this from Robert Tannenbaum, wow, the former chief of New York City homicide for many years, later a prominent defense attorney, and a distinguished author now also. Bob Tannenbaum represented Michael, and I was going to be a witness in that case. That's the terrible thing that is being brought out now. You know, I've been through this myself personally. News media, horrible people, I got to say this, horrible people. I sound like Donald Trump, don't I? Horrible people. But, you know, instead of dealing with the substantive aspects of this case, they go after Michael Baden,
right,
based upon that historical thing, which was quite unfair, unjust. Let's go back to the case. Let's talk about, here's the facts. Here are the facts. Jeffrey Epstein accused, formally convicted of crimes which make anybody sick to the stomach. And by the way, parenthetically, let me insert here, that's why this case is going to die now, because nobody gives a damn about how Jeffrey Epstein died, whether he was murdered, whether he committed suicide. When you think of everything that he did with these teenage girls and all the things that were done over a period of decades and so on, sure, it makes you nauseated. So I want to make that clear. This has nothing to do with the posthumous exoneration, whitewashing of Jeffrey Epstein. He was the most immoral, unethical, and terrible kind of person in the world. I agree. Okay. So now, that is a marvelous segue into what I want to say. So this guy, you put him in jail. They put him in with a roommate. Who is the cellmate? A former ex-cop, big, burly, heavily muscled guy, well over 200 pounds, who was charged with 4 murders. 4 murders. They put him in as a cellmate. Then, and then on July 23rd, there's an incident in which Jeffrey Epstein is found injured with some markings on his neck. They signed it off then and subsequently whitewashed it as a suicide attempt. There was no suicide attempt. I've been told now by people who are involved that this was an attack on him by the cellmate for whatever reason, planned, orchestrated, or spontaneous with a thug like that. Who knows? In any event, they did change Epstein to another cell with another cellmate. Now they put him under suicide watch. Fine. The suicide watch is inexplicably withdrawn.
Yeah.
What is it that changed that you withdraw the suicide watch? Then, the day before he's found dead, that cellmate is removed from the cell and Epstein is alone. And guess what? The cameras in the cell and just outside the cell are not working. And guess what further? The 2 guards assigned to observe him both fall asleep.
Yeah.
Now let me point out, this is not a 1-cell jail in East Overshoe or West Podunkville in Slobodkiville. This is the federal prison in Midtown Manhattan that housed John Gotti, El Chapo, the premier and metropolitan federal prison in the country.
Yep.
Now, you have these people, the writers for the Intelligencer, and others who are attacking Dr. Baden and attacking me to the extent that they know of my concurrence with Michael and the comments that I made weeks ago, attacking us and calling us conspiratorial theorists. Let me tell you what is going on here. These are circumstantial theorists. These are people that these are just circumstances. They just all came into play. Get a forensic epidemiologist. I want to make this very clear. This is not wild-eyed hyperbole. A forensic epidemiologist who deals with the study of crime, murders, etc., on an epidemiological basis, getting data. And let us find out how many people who have committed crimes of this nature, this extent, this heinous degree, are placed in a cell with somebody else who himself, that other prisoner, as terrible as he might be, would be angry and disgusted by what Jeffrey Epstein had done, and so on. But put that kind of a guy in the cell. Put in a guy who's been charged, if not convicted at that point already, of 4 murders. And then put suicide watch on and then have it withdrawn. Get the statistics. How many times has that happened? You can get these statistics, not hard to do now with all the technological data available, and find out what are the odds. 563 to 1, 975 to 1, 10,000 and so to 1.
Right.
Get them each one, and then see how many times have the cameras not worked in such a jail cell, and then get those statistics, and then get the statistics how many times have the guards been asleep. Put those together and do the multiplying. This is what epidemiologists do, and I will wager right now you'll come out to be odds in the tens, if not hundreds of millions to one. So when some of my colleagues and I have seen and read them making statements, oh, you can have these things in a suicidal sign. No, Michael Baden, after he left the New York City ME office, was a forensic pathologist for the New York State Police, and all deaths outside of the large metropolitan ME offices were referred there for him to review, including all prisoner deaths. So Michael reviewed all those. I read that he said he's done about 20,000 autopsies or so on. I have done about 21,000 autopsies. I have reviewed about 41,000 other autopsies, reviewed, supervised, signed off on that many. Neither Michael nor I has ever seen a case with multiple fractures like this, and then take all these other things and put them together. So I don't know where these people are saying, oh, it can happen. Sure, anything can happen. Yeah, the roof can cave in on me right now. The Red Sea can part. Let's talk about hard facts.
Right.
So these are the hard facts. And I deeply resent, in a good mood, I'll laugh it off. In a bad mood, I am angered by these asinine, vituperative, dismissive allegations of conspiratorial theorists. Let us deal with the hard facts. I will not reiterate what I've stated. I've given you the hard facts. Everything that I've said is a matter of record. You put them together then and see what you come up with.
Yeah, and I can understand your frustration, Doctor. It's definitely a disparaging term, and you're dealing in scientific evidence that I agree with you completely. It's just the very concept that even one camera in a prison facility like that would be broken for more than a few hours before it's replaced by a backup or something. It just doesn't, I mean, this is not somebody's garage where they happen to have a camera. This is, as you said, one of the most secure federal facilities, and the only facility like it in New York City, this Metropolitan Correction Center. They're housing the most extreme criminals in there, and certainly Jeffrey Epstein was a very important suspect, defendant. He had information on presidents and members of royal families. So that just adds to the ridiculous nature of the story.
Exactly.
And Doctor, you've been involved in the 1970s. You were part of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, reviewing evidence and information related to the John F. Kennedy assassination, the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, the Martin Luther King assassination, which frankly, those three cases alone share enough coincidental occurrences to make them totally implausible.
Yes, but I hope we can adjust those, talk about those someday. You're absolutely right. Every one of these, if you just look at them objectively and do not just buy in some kind of naive and stupid fashion, the government told us this, and therefore it's right, or it could not have taken place, it could not have been continued in this kind of secrecy, somebody would have spoken and so on. This is so naive. This is not the way top-level Secret Service spook organizations work, dealing with those three high-level assassinations now, talking about JFK and RFK and MLK. And people in America, oh, we don't do things like that. Is that right, huh? Okay. No, we're just going to let the KGB and the Chinese Secret Service groups, whatever they're called, even allies of ours in Mossad and Israel, we're going to let them do their thing. But we don't do these things in America. Oh, no. Oh, no. Not in America. Give me a break.
You've definitely had your fair share of dealing with these, definitely clandestine operations. And it was interesting to me, Doctor. Yeah, it was interesting to me, Doctor. Sorry?
No, go ahead, please.
Well, William Barr, the Attorney General, he came out, he said he was appalled, and then that was it. He sort of did nothing. I would have hoped there would be a more thorough and immediate investigation of what's going on at the facility, where are the associates of Jeffrey Epstein. I don't want to ask you to get too far out of your scope as a medical examiner, but these circumstances also add to the curiosity of this case as to why the New York City Medical Examiner would have come to such a conclusion with regard to the cause of death so far outside the normal process of conducting an autopsy. Do you know if anything will happen now, Doctor? Will there be another examination, or?
I would like to hope and honestly believe that there will be further examination reopening, but I will give you 100-to-1 odds and hope that I have to pay off the bet that there will not be. No, they've made their ruling, they've made their decision. As I've said, people don't give a damn, and for whatever the reasons are that Dr. Sampson made that ruling, that's it. No, you can see even at the national news media level, as far as I can tell from the 4 newspapers that I get, 1 local and 3 national, the case has already left the scene. So no, I don't believe that anything is going to happen. And now what's going to happen is they'll be attacking Dr. Baden. The Intelligencer, whatever that publication is, instead of delving into it themselves, they're attacking Dr. Baden. No, it's disgusting. It angers me. No matter how many times I talk about these things and think about them. I was just recently interviewed again on John Benet Ramsey, which is not high-level government, but a local cover-up for different reasons completely. It's the injustice. It's the travesty of justice. It's the failure to do the things that we have a right to expect and demand in our society. These are the things that anger me greatly. And it's not going to change. It's not going to change.
Yeah, that John Benet Ramsey autopsy is another mystery. There are a lot of clues and evidence with regard to a ransom note and other things.
About that another day. I'll be delighted to do that with you. It's a case that is just absolutely, you're showing the ransom note. We represent a small foreign faction, and the money demand was a nice round sum of $118,000. which is exactly the amount that John Ramsey got as a bonus from his company the year before. How many people in the world knew the bonus that John Ramsey received? That's the whole story in of itself. Don't have time to get into that now. But just another example of how, and it varies. Sometimes it's ineptitude, inexperience. Other times it's malevolent, planned, orchestrated cover-up. It varies. But going back now to Epstein, what we're dealing with here is a clear cover-up, a failure to deal with the hard facts. And I want to repeat what I said. This is something you might think about. There are forensic epidemiologists out there. This is a board-certified subspecialty in forensic science, recognized by the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. It's called forensic epidemiology. This is what they do. And do it out statistically, see how many times, and take each one of these set of circumstances separately. What are the odds are that they would put that kind of a prisoner in with a cellmate, that they would put him in with somebody who's charged with 4 murders of the most brutal nature, put on a suicide watch, which is then withdrawn, put in another roommate who is removed the day before, have cameras that don't work, have guards that don't stay awake, that sleep. Put each one of them in separately and see what the odds are that you come up with. And then look and see how many suicidal hangings there have been in kneeling positions, a la Robin Williams, where you have had 3 fractures of the hyoid bone and 2 of the thyroid cartilage. Do that, and then you'll see. Go back to the Intelligencer and my other colleagues who are speaking out and saying, oh, these things can happen. Put that all together and see what you come up with. Confront those people with those facts. That's what I want to hear about.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very convincing what you're telling us, Doctor. It's based in fact and your experience. And I really find it extremely interesting that, you told us that story about Dr. Baden being sort of run out of the medical examiner's office, but it was strictly for political reasons. So it seems to me that
yes,
you...
nothing to do with competence. No, it was because he spoke out on the Nelson Rockefeller death. That's right. Wow. I remember it very well. Yeah.
So you and he are sort of the same ilk in that you're not afraid to say things that are politically unpopular when they are in fact the truth.
Yes, and we've been on opposite sides, most specifically John F. Kennedy, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, Michael, and my other colleagues, although they highly criticized the terrible autopsy that was done on John F. Kennedy, the incompetence of the naval pathologist Humes and Boswell, who had never done a gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers. They did not hesitate to be extremely critical, but they concluded that somehow they got it right. And I disagreed, and I gave my minority report before the House Committee in 1978. So it isn't that Michael and I just waltzed together step by step. We've been involved on the same side in many cases, and we've been involved on opposite sides. In this case, and you recall, and you stated at the beginning of our interview, that I have been making these statements back in August. So for me, this isn't new, except that now I have the autopsy report. Now I have the full disclosure by Dr. Baden, who's been permitted to speak, and I put it all together, and these things solidify, corroborate, underscore, emphasize, completely validate the conclusions, opinions that I have expressed months ago.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Doctor. And just out of curiosity, is that autopsy report considered a medical record that's private, or is that something that can be released to the public?
I'm not sure about that. It was released to me by the brother, not by Dr. Baden. So I can't, I have to treat it confidentially because it came from the brother to me. I don't know. That's a good question. They've released a supplemental anthropological report, which you have shown on your screen, showing the fractures. I don't know about the report itself. I would think that by now it should no longer be a matter of official privacy, but you'd have to check and see with the authorities on that.
Sure, and certainly if Mark Epstein, I believe is his name, wants to get some public attention so that there can be a new investigation, perhaps he would agree to allow you to release it to Crowdsource the Truth. Maybe we could ask him.
Yes, that's something to pursue. Yes.
Excellent. Well, Doctor, thank you so much. I know you have limited time, and I appreciate...
Let me know about your program, how we can plug into it and to learn about it, okay?
Absolutely. Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Cyril Wecht, for joining us today, and I will speak to you very soon.
Nice being with you. Thank you,
sir. Have a great weekend,
okay.
Doctor, and thanks everybody for watching.